we're really lucky to have some great people with us today. Rachel Coleman from Pinsent Masons, thank you very much for joining us today. I'll get you to introduce yourself shortly. We've also got Lauren Riley, who is behind LinkUp and really helping to drive some change and think about the way that the legal law firm lawyer-client relationship works and bringing some efficiencies around there. So some great pieces in there. And also Laura Bosworth from Amiqus. So three people who've all hugely been really involved in terms of changing the industry and have lots of input and great things to talk about today. Rachel, do you want to kick off and just introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Coleman. As Chris mentioned, I work at Pinsent Masons. My background is actually as a transactional finance lawyer. I was a banking lawyer in my first life as a lawyer at Pinsent Masons, but I have since joined what we call our advanced delivery team. Our advanced delivery team is a multidisciplinary team of lawyers and our technology services and our legal project managers. And what we focus on full time now is accelerating the growth of technology legal services within Pinsent Masons and looking at how we can design new solutions which involve our people, our process, and our technology to push forward, I suppose, the legal tech agenda across the market.
Excellent. Thank you, Rachel. Lauren, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I'm Lauren Riley, founder CEO of the LinkUp. I'm in a previous life, I was a qualified solicitor. Well, I still am on the roll somewhere, but no longer in practice. I was on the private client side, so as a family lawyer specifically. And before that, even I had done a business graduate scheme for a car company, and it was nothing to do with law, but everything to do. It was an American company, so it's everything to do with customer service. So they kind of drilled that into me, and I arrived in the legal space. And I was somewhat surprised at where client experience fell in the list of priorities for the sector. And that's what really drove my passion to create the LinkUp. And that's what I do now and have done for the last 5 years. So we are leading a new era of client experience through smart technology. We're delivering seamless communication between law firms and clients. And that's my baby, that's my passion. And that's me.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Lauren. Laura.
Thanks very much. I'm Laura Bosworth. I head up sales and marketing for Amiqus. We are a technology company based in Scotland, but with a fully remote workforce, obviously, right now, right across Europe. We provide a digitally secure remote identity verification platform. So our initial target clients were actually the legal firm and legal industry, but now we are looking at we are actually selling into a lot more sectors. Our tool is essentially an AML compliance tool. However, we're working across various professional services, accounting, financial services, recruitment, public sector, and our tool can be used for AML, KYC, recruitment, and pre-employment checks, as well as digital identity. So essentially, we want our clients to create a much better candidate or client experience, one that they can really be proud of. We do.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Laura. And then I'll just, because I didn't even introduce myself at the beginning, I'll throw myself into the mix. So I think I recognise a lot of faces that are popping up today. So Chris Grant, and I am LawTech Director in Barclays Ventures, and looking after the LawTech ecosystem, certainly focused around the Notting Hill Gate Lab, which is currently very much shut and gathering dust. But the ecosystem is very much alive and online and virtual, as we can very much see today. So we will quick off with some questions, but it's a question around if you are a lawyer, how well do you think your firm has adapted to remote working? I think that applies to pretty much all of us as to how we've all adapted. You can do 5 options in there of really poor, poorly, okay, well, and awesomely, and we'll see whether that runs and watch for that popping up. But in the meantime, found moving to remote and whether they've got any tips or tricks for making the most of it. Rachel, should we start with you?
Yeah, of course. So I suppose in terms of challenges, where do you begin when you move an international law firm entirely to remote across all of your global offices? I kind of picked out a few that I thought were the most pertinent from our perspective. I come from a transactional background. Like I mentioned, I'm a banking lawyer by trade. So the first immediate challenge we have is how do we take transactional work entirely online? We can't have meetings anymore. We can't have signing meetings. We're not even in the office being able to print off at the same rate that we usually would the numbers of finance documents that we have to review. So I think in terms of tips and tricks, we were already set up as an agile working firm. So what this meant was that we were able to transition pretty quickly, actually, to working from home, to not necessarily working in an office environment. And as we did that, also reassure our clients that there was going to be that business continuity in terms of what they usually expect from us in terms of service. Tips and tricks there that I think we found particularly helpful, making sure that your staff have the tools that they need to work in a remote environment. And I'm not just referring to, proper desk chair, laptop, couple of screens, but thinking about the other tools they might need. Suddenly once you're out of an office environment, the email traffic just gets horrendous. How do you cut that down? What other tools can you give your team, whether it's instant messaging, Slack channels, Microsoft Teams, trying to kind of cut down on that constant barrage of emails. We set up an e-signing hub, was a really big one for us. Traditionally lawyers are, and I think still have been, quite hesitant to embrace the concept of electronic signatures. It's not something that we come across really often on banking transactions. And now, it's how we're getting everything signed. So making sure that we were set up to offer e-signing as quickly as possible. Resource as well, I'll touch on this a bit more later, but as we've all been aware, as we've gone into this lockdown environment, the capacity of certain teams has really dipped and flowed depending on the work that's coming through. So, we've thought quite quickly and quite smartly about where do we have pockets of capacity, where do we have pockets of the business that are really busy, how can we use that capacity to its best advantage, being more flexible in terms of how we resource work and being more flexible in terms of who we bring in to work on particular transactions. A lawyer is a lawyer at the end of the day. We all have a specialist skill set that can be applied to lots of different deals. And then also making sure that we're really communicating with our clients. We've had, COVID WebExes, we've had guides going out about how we can continue to service transactions. So making sure we've been really transparent with our clients about, this is how we're moving, this is how we're going to do it, and these are the tools and the procedures we're putting in place to make that useful. And so the only other one I wanted to touch on quickly, Chris, is I think something that's really important and maybe gets overlooked a little bit was the importance of culture. And as a firm, we are a purpose-led law firm, and we're also a signatory to the Mindful Business Charter. And I think both of those things have become really pertinent in a lockdown environment. Suddenly you're out of the office, your working day blends into your home life, you have additional challenges with children and managing homeschooling and all the rest of it, and making sure that we are mindful now that we're all working remotely in terms of the demands that we put both on our colleagues, but also on our clients, and making sure that we continue to have that sort of purpose-led, that togetherness as a firm. So, a lot of transparency in terms of our updates that come from our senior partner, weekly videos and the like, lots of regular comms going around the firm, and trying to find fun things to do as well. We've had photo competitions, we've had remote business development events with clients, quizzes, bingo, you name it. We probably try to run it on some sort of team meeting if possible. So I think that's really important, and it's something obviously that's facilitated by technology, but I think is something that's also just really important is remembering, culture and being a sort of one business and one firm becomes extra important when everyone's suddenly working in their own little office at home.
Yeah, and Rachel, I think that's a really pertinent one because it's one that I think I've found the most difficult one to deal with is nothing is now, and not that life was ever 9 to 5 before, but it's even harder to do that right now when there is so many other things that are coming in and out of what is your working space, which for me, a kitchen, which has dogs, cats, as I've mentioned before, and all sorts. But you're absolutely right. It's how do you switch off? How do you get to a point in the day where you can kind of stop, and at what point do you really start in the day? Because that becomes a real grey space, and we know that there's been challenges in the industry, and like you mentioned, the Mindful Business Charter is a great initiative that's helping to really drive that, but the game's just changed, so it makes it harder to do.
Totally, and I think you just have to be strict, both with yourself, but also within your teams. We are transparent as possible in terms of what people's working hours are, the other commitments that they have to balance now alongside their work. I'm very lucky that in the team that I work in, we are project-led rather than transaction-led, and with that comes a lot of work in the environment that we're in just now, but I think comes a little bit more flexibility in terms of deadlines and being respectful of people's different working hours, bringing in additional resources when you need it. We've learned a lot on our project management team to help us get organised, to make sure that we are still delivering what we need to deliver whilst all these competing demands of home working come in. So just have to think quick, think a bit differently, and just be respectful, I think, of the environment that we're all currently working in.
Definitely. Thank you. Lauren, what do you, I mean, particularly with what you have and what the LinkUp does, and it's all about that interaction. How have you found things?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I'll answer it in two parts, really. I'll obviously answer it on behalf of the LinkUp and how we found it as a business, but I obviously have access to many, many lawyers. I mean, our user base is very diverse, from sort of big, mid to small firms, and geographically dispersed as well. So I've been able to get a bit of a flavour of speaking to firms that are doing really well out of this, and not so much. So I'll try and sort of weave that in as well. But if I start with the LinkUp, we really had quite an easy transition in this, because although we have an office in the city centre, we always offered that flexibility to our team anyway. I started this in my bedroom in Clapham 6 years ago, so we were born agile effectively. So being like tech startup, scale up, that was in our DNA. We had all of the systems in place. We've been using Zoom for years. So that part was pretty straightforward. So obviously, it culturally has an impact not being face to face, but sort of in terms of our productivity level and what plans we had to have in place, that was relatively straightforward. And of course, we're a venture backed entity as well. So from a funding perspective, we're also on a really secure footing, which is obviously very different to a lot of businesses. So I feel very grateful for the position that we started in for that from our side of things. And of course, obviously, the LinkUp is digitally enabling law firms to communicate with their clients. So it's of course an opportunity for us, and we've seen huge spikes in sign-ups to the platform. So there's lots of positives as well in there. But then, of course, we're supporting a user base of firms that are, that weren't ready for this, that, didn't have any remote working capability at all, that literally, I was ringing managing partners to see how we could support them, and they were like, carrying desktops home. It's literally that sort of rudimental. How do we get off the ground with this remote working style? So, and we, I know managing partners of firms that have already unfortunately succumbed financially and will not make it back from this. So that's really difficult to see people who've put the heart and soul into that. So, and then obviously some departments, as Rachel mentioned, are thriving through this as well. Like, there's an upturn in business. So it's been a really mixed bag. Rachel hit on something before about the cultural aspect of it and the human side of this. I'm sure one of your next questions will be about how technology can help, but going back to that really fundamental part of the fact that, this is affecting a lot of people, and whether you've had to furlough staff or not. I've seen some of the management team of our users do phenomenally well at communicating, very regular sort of webinars, and obviously that is digital now, it's not face to face, but the ones that have really showed that they really care about their team seem to be the ones that are winning and having their team rallying around and doing the most that they can in this period. So very diverse experience from our business's perspective, and then also being a small part of lots and lots of law firms.
Yeah, and look, it was super interesting. I agree on that bit where you saw firms, and certainly the founders that we have within the labs were just ready to go. Before we'd even made the decision to close the labs, everybody had already vacated the premises and were working really effectively and being able to operate in a way, and just coming in for those face-to-face meetings that they still needed to do. There's a lot that I think we can all learn from that. Yeah,
well, I hope so. I do public speaking, every so often at these events, and I've long since talked about the tech platforms that we use that enable us to be more agile. This wasn't remote working; it was just about speed to accomplishing anything, essentially. And like the suite of technologies, which I'd be happy to share with anybody if they wanted to ask me offline about what we put together and how we use them. But that's been pretty seamless.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I can see that the poll is open. It's been open for a while, so if everybody's got access to that, then and please do dip in. Again, the invite has got the link to that in there. Laura, your turn.
Thank you. To be honest, as you know, we were already very much geared up to work fully remote, and in that capacity, it meant that essentially be moved, like you say, just overnight, and that was absolutely fine. And because we've been used to having minimum 50% of our staff working remotely across the UK and Europe, we've been well versed in how to make sure everybody's involved. And I think that's probably the most important aspect, is if you've got a happy team, they're a productive team, and not an underutilized team as well. And that's probably the most important factor. One of the key things that I'll say to anybody, which is probably quite interesting on this call particularly, is using the cameras as much as possible when you come into video conferencing. We've got a lot of clients that probably weren't used to using a camera on their laptop, but actually the more that they get into the swing of it, the better the interaction is, the better the conversation. So that's probably the most important tip. And as far as the cultural side, that probably is the most important in terms of keeping the team together. We very quickly mobilised a team that was dedicated to social interactions across all the teams and wellness. So that was everything, as Rachel mentioned. We've had many different things on Zoom that you probably wouldn't have expected, ranging from treasure hunts to cocktail classes and Pictionary and yoga, pretty much anything in between. Regular coffee breaks are something as well, whether it be across the teams or with your clients, just sort of taking some time. What I would say, particularly at the start of the lockdown, was people had a lot more time to chat than ever before. So coming from a sales role, that's always quite nice, but I was actually trying to fit all the calls in. But having some space to break out is really, really key, and it's important to take time with your team. In a leadership position, I think you really do need to lead by example and take time to speak to people, get involved in the social things, and actually make time and get to know your team better. And what better opportunity have you got than taking some time to actually get to know your team and understand what motivates them and what actually encourages them to do a better job, and if there's anything else you can do. And the other thing that came up, I don't think come up so far, is workstation assessments, and making sure the workstation is actually right and fit for purpose. What I don't want on the back of this pandemic is loads of really sore backs. So we have allocated, as you would, some time and budget for individuals to actually get the right seat and the right desk, and obviously use as many monitors as they need. But yeah, I think it's been a really interesting time speaking with clients, speaking with staff and investors. Everybody's doing things slightly differently. I don't think there's one right way, one wrong way, but you need to find the way that works best for your business, and that's the most important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And look, where you started there, it just kind of made me think in that having your workforce remote and you actually find different ways of communicating. We've always talked about, bring yourself to work. Well, suddenly you really do bring yourself to work, including your entire house and whatever you choose to have in the background. But you also start to see more of people's personalities coming through as people come in with ideas to interact more, engage more. And that's something that you never get to see by just having a cup of tea or those water cooler moments, right? So I think I've learned a lot more about the people I work with over this period than anything else.
Yeah, really definitely. And also the clients, I've met more people's pets in this period than I ever have before, which is great for me. I'm Wilbur, my Pomeranian, makes it to many a meeting with me.
It does kind of put life in perspective, especially if you're having one of those tense calls or it's an intense conversation, just for the cat to walk past or start nuzzling your ear. It shifts your mindset completely. We've got some nice questions coming through, which I will touch on at the end, so at least we know that works. So please do be putting your questions into VBox. We will touch on those at the end. Second question then for everyone, and look, we've talked there around the challenges that we face, but what do we think are the opportunities that we're starting to see come through, and how also we think this might develop legal and the law practice going forward? Laura, do you want to kick us off this time?
Yeah, I mean, quite obviously, because of where we are, the answer is hopefully technology and sort of digital solutions that are out there. And the good news for the legal space is that there's been many businesses working really hard to produce really great platforms for a long time. There's an argument to say they've been underutilized, and I think Rachel's example was excellent. Digital signatures, you know, I don't know the procurement process inside of that firm, but I'm sure somebody has been championing that for many months, weeks. And then, you know, something like this happens and it's really the catalyst for change inside a really large organisation like Rachel's. And, you know, so there are many different sizes of law firms, I'm sure, that are listening today. So, you know, the fact that there are solutions out there that will answer problems that you've maybe not prioritised before. So embracing of digital technology. We're seeing it obviously as well in the LinkUp. We've had sort of take up of a platform, you know, globally as well. You know, different continents have surprised us, and that's been really fantastic to see. You know, really interesting use cases as well, because I think often the barrier to adoption of technology is the lawyers really understanding, okay, this thing is available, but how does it apply specifically to me or to my firm? And obviously we're now seeing a different, you know, a different client almost as well, because it's not only you that's been displaced, it's your clients, you know, they're in lockdown. So an example from the LinkUp would be that, you know, confidential conversations, you know, used to, whether it's from about an M&A deal that you can't talk about in front of your teenage children, or, you know, it's a family matter and you're, you know, considering leaving your spouse post lockdown, you know, they're conversations that just can't be had on a video call or over the phone, or naturally not face to face. So technologies that are like the LinkUp, with that back and forth communication, you know, that's a use case that we would never have come up with before, and neither would firms. So we're now able to sort of add value by sort of saying, well, this is how other people are using it. So I think that's really great. And on a board call the other week, we had a phrase called like almost like a bounce back package. And I haven't quite worked that through, but I really like it as a concept. So like the LinkUp would obviously be part of it, but, you know, other things like, you know, Rachel talked about digital signatures. So you can run those through our platform already. You know, Amiqus talks about ID verification, those sort of things. Like what do firms need as a collective to really be, you know, like bounce back and sort of future proof, if you will. So that's a really interesting concept. And my hope is that procurement for law firms, which I know is frustrating for the fee earners that want to use these solutions, they suggest them and have to, you know, obviously go through a cycle. You know, we've got proof on this webinar already that, you know, a significant size business is able to make decisions really swiftly when the impetus is there and there's a very clear business case for it. There's never been a clearer business case for adoption of technology inside these legal practices. So hopefully the fact that face-to-face meetings aren't taking place is not prohibitive to the buying cycle, because, you know, that has previously been the preference of law firms, is to, you know, have the team in and meet everybody involved in that. So presuming that barrier isn't there and that they will adopt these solutions like subscription-based services, SaaS, like a lot of the rest of the professional services sector do, then I think it's, you know, it's actually a really exciting time for them as well.
Yeah, I really agree. I think there's a lot of being able to try the stuff that's always been limited or restricted before, and it is challenging to adopt and do new things and find new ways of doing it, or even be allowed to try to do new things. I mean, if I think back to my own legal training, an awful lot of the response you've always got was, you know, it's just the way that we do things, and you don't necessarily have time to move over that, outside of that. And even just to think about how to do something in a new way, that takes more time than it would for you to just do the job that you were tasked with. So yeah, I really think.
Absolutely. And the other point is, I forgot to mention that actually, you know, some credit is owed to vendors in this space as well, because a lot of them have done quite a lot to support the industry. So, you know, whether that's their existing user base sort of reaching out, trying sort of to help them, you know, chatting them through the remote solutions that they use to make sure that they, you know, have access to the knowledge, like you've alluded to already. Startups were better placed than many incumbents to navigate this sort of landscape. So we've actually got some valuable knowledge that we can share, and lots of them are doing that. But also in terms of deals and offers, and we made the LinkUp completely free for new users pre-lockdown. So we've actually done that to support the industry, because we know that they have to survive and they have to thrive in order for legal tech to do the same. So a lot of vendors have made offers and deals out there, so they're worth investigating. Yeah. So if these law firms are in the market, it's a really great time to be adopting technology too.
Couldn't agree more. Laura.
Yeah. I think the thing that strikes me is it's not necessarily about making things digital. It needs to be about making things better and doing it for the right reasons. So just because it's the way it's always been doesn't necessarily make it right. However, in a traditional sector such as the legal profession, client expectations are really on the rise. So you see everything that's happening across other sectors, financial services, accountancy to an extent. So therefore, the client expectations are already rising well beyond the capabilities necessarily of the sector. So that ensures that the industry will remain competitive. And I think that's a really important factor to remember, especially in a situation like this. You need to sort of look after what you've got, but always have one eye on the future and what that might bring and what might change. And I think the opportunity that technology presents to this sector is vast and is barely tapped at the moment. And we obviously started Amiqus. The journey was essentially looking at how to make civil justice accessible. And the first step in that was actually making anti-money laundering accessible and digital. So effectively our product as it stands just now was the first step in a longer journey. And I think that's probably going to be the case, as with many technologies and that advancement in that space, it needs to start somewhere, and it's all about building blocks as well. So I think that's probably a really important thing to remember, particularly as you look at developing the sector as where we are now, but where could we be? And that's a big question, I guess.
And you've touched on something that Lauren also mentioned in there, and it is those building blocks. And actually what we're starting to see is some of the startups that are out there coming together and thinking about how collectively they start to fix a bigger problem, which I think we've had a massive challenge with the LawTech that's been coming through, and that it just fixes little bits of this, little bits of that, when there's a bigger problem to be solved. And this is kind of almost driving that conversation a bit more. Rachel, interesting from within the law firm, and we've talked a lot around the challenges on our side and certainly what we experience, and we've talked about the dreaded procurement cycle in amongst all of that as well. What's your views?
I'll try not to mention procurement. I actually wrote four bright pink headers as my answer to this question, which I think probably shows the enthusiasm I have about this question in particular. So the first thing I wrote here down was clients. So I think, for anyone who's dialed into the call and who works within a legal practice where you work for in-house legal teams, you'll probably have heard the phrase a lot: we want you to be an extension of our legal team, be an extension to our legal offering. And it's kind of hard to say, what does that mean when we're working in traditional practice? But I think the wonderful thing about all being remote now is that what an amazing opportunity that is to really work out ways that you can be that extension. Buildings are gone, barriers are gone, location is gone. And it's a great opportunity to try new ways that you could really be that extension and be that sort of additional resource to your in-house legal clients. So that was one I wanted to mention because I thought it was quite interesting. Another two I've got here, smart resourcing, a really big one, and something that we focus on a lot. Location, as I mentioned before, has become overnight less important, and thinking about how you can resource more fluidly around your business and manage those workflows. The fantastic thing now, which our team has definitely been benefiting from, is suddenly you have a lot of transactional lawyers, a lot of litigation lawyers who have a bit of capacity, who have that time now to put down their pens and focus on innovation projects, focus on projects that involve bringing technology into the firm. And that is massive for a little team like mine within Pinsent. It's such a massive help. And it means you're upskilling those lawyers that when you come back to normality, as and when that will be, you now have a workforce that, has experience of using these tools, who understands what goes into using these tools. I think that's really valuable. The paperless point we've already touched on. We've seen a massive increase in requests to work on contract automation projects, which is fantastic. E-signing we've already mentioned, and getting all of our lawyers, up to speed on what those e-signing platforms do and how they work. Another big one for us has been workflows. So we've, in some parts of our business, seen a massive influx in work. In others, we're looking at, okay, how can we resource that work so that these parts of the business are busier? And so building workflows that allow firms, triage work properly, to communicate with the client properly, reduce the touch points on that work, try and make your lawyers work as effectively as possible, collaborate better across your business. So, work was a big one for us. And I think Lauren, you mentioned, the opportunities coming from vendors, the likes of Legatix and other businesses like that who are offering these free trials now to try and encourage firms to be using these workflows, these transaction management platforms is great. So they're probably the big themes that we've seen coming out, particularly in my team over the last few weeks for sure.
That workflow one is one of my favourite topics of conversation, and one that I get so pulled in. I'm going to try not to go down that path. But thinking about my times, certainly within Barclays Legal and working in-house, in that that's one of the key pieces. Even being able to triage your work, understanding what is coming through the door, who is doing it, knowing where it's going, whether it's going to an external law firm, whether one of your lawyers are doing it, whether actually you can self-serve. We've organically grown as in-house legal functions, and we've taken from law firms, but we don't have the kind of the fundamental structure that's in place within law firms, though it's not also equally great around workflow. But there's something in there that kind of unlocks the rest of the process, because that becomes the spine that everything else attaches to. Because if you're starting to identify the work and know where it's going, that's where contract automation immediately fits right in.
Yeah, absolutely. And now more than ever, understanding, what work is coming in and where it's going, how so important now in the environment that we're in. And like you said, the point of integration, once you unlock that workflow, you know where that work is going.
Yeah.
Suddenly you can start doing some much more fun, interesting things, trying automating as much as you can. Yeah, like you said, it unlocks a lot.
Yeah, that's definitely a webinar all on its own. I could do a series on that. Yeah. Favourite topic of conversation is definitely that one. So look, last question before we move on to the stuff that we've got coming through, and also just on the questions that we've got in. If there's one that you particularly like, you can do a little thumbs up at the side of it, and then obviously we'll focus more on some of those that everybody wants to hear answered. So last question that I've got for you all then. So obviously we are seeing some change. We're seeing the opportunity for new adoption of technologies, and people that are listening and paying attention more and more willing to get involved. What happens when we come out the other side of this? Is there going to be this default of everybody just rolling back to the way that we used to do things or not? What extent do you think that will happen, and how can we avoid it? Laura, start with you.
Sure. So I think we've got an opportunity to redefine BAU essentially. It's not simply going to be sort of doing business. We're going to have to make business count and be really proud of the work that we're doing. And I think that's an opportunity that we can't shy away from. I studied animal biology a long time ago at university. And if evolution has taught us anything, it's not necessarily survival of the fittest. It's generally what we see in the wild. It's not every animal for itself. Cooperation is incredibly important, and successful and survival and success in survival. Cooperation is very tangible in that. The basis of life is essentially complex cells evolving from cooperating simple cells, effectively. There's your biology lesson for today. So the ability to adapt and change is going to be key to every sector, not just legal sector or this industry. And I think that working together is probably going to be something that will come out of this, and that will be BAU. And I think it's understanding what we're particularly good at and what we need help with. And hopefully that will be something that will be will stay with us. And hopefully I won't have to do homeschooling with my 8-year-old anymore. That would be a benefit.
I love the biology lesson. I think that is it's absolutely 100% accurate. And yeah, I think there's shoots of that already happening, because we always talk about collaboration. And if there's going to be a real change in the industry, and we will start to see true adoption of some of the technologies that are coming through, it's only going to happen and happen well if there's a group of people that come to do it. Law firms working individually without the support of maybe their clients to even work out how we can utilize some of the technology that are coming through it's wasted effort. It's expensive, there's huge risk. Let's share the cost, let's share the risk, and actually really decide how we can come together to implement some of these things. And that is now really starting to happen. So it's good to see, but I couldn't agree more. Rachel.
Will there be an overnight change? There won't be an overnight change. It's the legal industry, let's be real. However, I think what we'll see coming out is a few things. I've mentioned location before, and I'll mention it again. Less reliance on location. better resourcing from firms and practitioners in terms of how they deliver work. What I also think we'll see is lawyers coming out with additional skills, hopefully, who've had the chance to upskill themselves on either technology that their firm currently offers or technology that their firm is currently looking into. So hopefully you'll start to see a new breed of lawyer coming through, which will be fantastic. And I think lawyers who are less hesitant to get involved in projects that involve use of technology and that involve the, the use of innovative ways of doing things, I think this has taught people to be more flexible, to be more open to doing things differently, and a bit of a culture shift really across law firms. So that's what I'm expecting to see is a willingness, I think, from practitioners now to get involved.
Awesome. Lauren, you've got a really unique perspective because you're kind of sat in amongst all of those people that are changing or not changing. What do you see?
I'm an optimist. I'm a founder. I wouldn't have tried to disrupt the legal sector before legal tech was really a thing if I wasn't. So I am optimistic that this will have sparked a change for the better, and it would be a really wasted opportunity if everybody just sort of went back to the way things were before. I think if we look at it like almost a transverse of the questions, one of the limiting factors for adopting technology is, I suppose, how comfortable the sector has been. So even when a firm can identify that this experience would be better for the client, because there's a few of us have talked about client experience now, if the client isn't leaving them and it's not affecting naturally sort of hitting their bottom line, and they're still comfortable with the practice, they're still profitable without having adopted these technology, whether it's contract automation or communication solutions, there wasn't the necessity to move. Whereas this obviously this time period has been uncomfortable, and it's shone a light on things that perhaps didn't work so well. And I'm very sorry to say, but it doesn't look like this is going to be a one-off event. It looks like it may have, ramifications in weeks, months, potentially even into next year. So, even if we're allowed in the office and everything can go back to quote unquote normal, I think it really will have had a fundamental change in the way that people view the importance of just being able to carry on and do things the way we always have, because versus actually we were underprepared for that, and we kind of didn't prioritize these things because no one could have seen it coming. So I am quite confident that it will have changed the sector, and like I say, for the better in lots of ways as well. And just to throw my 2p into the workflow conversation, seeing as you brought it up, is just that I think honestly that's one of the most heartbreaking things about watching law firms implement change is their lack of ability to kind of grasp onto that workflow concept. Not, they're capable of doing it, but the capacity it requires. So, for example, in the LinkUp, we have milestones and automation. So if you integrate our technology into the case management system and you understood and you had a workflow built into that, you could automate communications out to your clients at specific junctures, and that, everybody recognises the value and the efficiency that will be driven through that. But, so few law firms have actually invested in mapping the workflow to the extent that they can actually achieve that utopian vision, even when they can see it for themselves. So, the capacity that's now potentially available within firms that like Rachel said, that's a real opportunity to use your, you don't have to be a technical, you don't have to be a project manager. The fee earners have got a part to play in this as well. And that's could be really pivotal.
Yeah, look, I think we definitely, I'm bringing you all back in for another conversation on workflow, because it is one that really could be, if we can unlock a lot of that, it would bring such quick wins. And even being able to think about the data that comes out the other side of that, and for once we'll have actual clean data that tells us what we need to do next and where we can fill gaps and where we can bring technology in to bring greater efficiencies, and who's the right person to be doing the right work. I mean, that's what we've always talked about, is who's the right person, what's the work, who's the right person to do it, and where should they be. So there's plenty definitely to talk around that. I think you're right. We're going to continue to see iterations of changes, and there are going to be new challenges that are going to come through. We're only just scratching the surface of certainly the legal problems that we're going to experience. And we know from the financial crisis, we're still living with traumas that were experienced through that and the legal consequences. this is very much going to be the same. So how do we get ourselves ahead of the game so that we're able to respond to all of that as an industry? And, those smart firms that get themselves in a position where they're able to do it quickly, effectively and efficiently puts them already ahead of the game as well. So I think definitely interesting times ahead for sure. Well, look, thank you very much all for responding to certainly my questions. We've got a good 15 minutes left or so. We've got loads of questions that have come through. Just back on our poll, which we've now had also the results back in from. Lovely to see that we were all up on the high end of either awesomes or goods. So it was actually the number 4 that came. I can't remember what number 4 was now off the top of my head. Let me have a quick look, see if I can find it. Well, good. So we've got good, well, and awesome is what's come through. So that's always nice to see. So let's look at the questions. So one of the ones that we've got a lot of thumbs up for is how should LawTech startups best engage law firms in today's environment? Who wants to take a first stab at that one? Maybe if we go Lauren first, and then we can maybe get Rachel to give us a view, and then back to Laura.
Yeah, I've been asked this question before, and I'm reticent with my answer because I know it's not practicable for every business. But like I said, the LinkUp's response to this was to make our platform free, for a time limited period to help firms out through the crisis. I'm not suggesting that every business does that because I know that not every business will be in the financial position to stand that. But anything that you can do to support your customer base, existing or new in this period, would be really appreciated. So that obviously for use of the platform, we've launched 2 new features in this period to enable them to use the LinkUp internally and also to win new business. We launched a client inquiry module, and that was always in the pipeline. We've then been able to repackage the messaging about how they can use that to win business in this phase. So if you've got any development capability that you can think of solutions that will help in a quick time frame, crisis specific solutions, you're a startup, so you're an agile business, you are, you've obviously got the development capability in there. Is there anything you can turn on quickly that will help specific to this pain point? Because how you market your solution or even maybe pivot into another space, the world doesn't look the same as it did in March. So that's an opportunity for a business as well as a threat. And then just general support. It hasn't just been free use of the platform. We've really genuinely engaged with our user base to see if there's anything we could do, like knowledge transfer, and to help them. And I know from the relationship I have with suppliers to my business that the ones that have been supportive, other relationships I'll continue. And without naming any names, the ones that, I felt have not been, that people really remember how you treated them in this sort of situation. Yeah. So that's a really powerful message.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, just go to Laura a little bit. Just while we're talking about that, I mean, but is that something that you've also felt?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've been working very closely with a lot of our existing clients, particularly those that are experiencing a real downturn. So our conveyancing clients are generally high volume clients because they're checking, obviously, the houses are putting on the market and then the ones that are selling, etc. So AML checks are rife in conveyancing, but that's not happening right now. So we've been able to help them out, reducing costs for them where possible and pausing licenses, that type of thing. And I'm very much an advocate of you get what you give, and they will remember that, and they'll remember that we've treated them in that fair way. But also we are a scaling business, so there's no getting away from it. Yes, we've got a good excuse if we're not meeting our targets that we've set each other, etc. However, we can't stand still and we can't wait for things to improve. So it's really important for us to continue to look at distribution channels. Co-selling is definitely something that we've looked to explore a lot more recently. Also, the pivoting is definitely something that we've done. I mean, we've started to do AML checks for house builders, which were never a target audience of ours, but they were gladly we were introduced to one through one of our existing clients, and it's kind of grown from there. So definitely important to keep your mind open and be open to opportunities, but be realistic about them. I think that's the most important thing. Don't always assume the best. I am generally an optimistic person, but I take it with a pinch of salt, being Scottish.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Rachel, what about from the law firm perspective? How would you like me to engage with you?
I think the pain point thing that's already been mentioned is a big one. So particularly in an environment like we're in now, where budget is more important than ever, I think it's really important to understand, why does the firm you're trying to engage need the product that you're offering? It's drilled into us, don't buy tech for tech's sake. What are we trying to do here? What value add are we going to get from that piece of technology? Super important, and possibly even more important now in the current climate. I think things that just to be aware of as well, procurement processes into law firms are always, unfortunately, quite slow. Chances are they might be a bit slower right now. I think bear with that. Be aware of the process that you need to work through, and be understanding of the process that you'll need to work through. I've already mentioned the pain point and the pivoting. There may be an opportunity during your conversations to discover new use cases, and the ability of a provider or a vendor to turn their hand to them and come up with a solution is really valuable. We've had it on a couple of recent pilots where we've seen a great piece of technology, and it does partly what we want, but maybe not all of what we want. And the ability of that vendor to turn around a solution for our new use case was great. And then it goes back again to, when we're talking about workflows and organizing ourselves, if you are, involved in a pilot with a firm at the moment, just being super organized, having a really clear program set out of how the pilot's going to run, particularly right now when everyone is remote, and clear communication channels, clear milestones, et cetera, it's the basics, really. It's getting the basics right, but remembering that pain point and that value add is the important thing at the heart of it.
Oh yeah, I think the pain point is the essential piece. And look, there's a question we've just had in just back on digital signatures actually as well, which obviously a pain point. And the question being, where will that end up, and what needs to happen to allow secure and legally binding e-signatures to be put in place?
Is that one aimed at me?
You can have that one, Rachel.
Yeah, I mean, I think, where do I even begin? We have plenty of comms on this. I think the market is comfortable. I won't talk about the exceptions, but broadly speaking, the market is comfortable with these signatures now, and particularly right now, it's what our clients are expecting us to be using. And my very much hope is that once we move back into normal life, that will continue to be the case. Are there exceptions to when we can and cannot use these signatures? Yeah, absolutely. Registration, I think, is one of them. When you're wanting to get something at the registers, e-signatures are a little bit more complicated. But I think broadly speaking now, that there is a shift of change. We are comfortable that they work, and we wouldn't be using them if they didn't. And we understand what the exceptions are to that. So I think that fear, it's an e-signature, it doesn't work, it is going. I think we realise that's not the case, broadly speaking.
Anybody else have some views on e-signatures?
I would just, I guess, in terms of policy around it, I think that's probably one of the key things that comes. We have the same issues, I guess, with digital identity and where and when we can use digital documentation, etc. We're in a fantastic position in that we're speaking to a large public sector body about, we've already signed up ScotGov, but we're looking at what we could do for NHS as well. And the ability to do things that we weren't able to do before, but we're now in a prime position to actually get involved in a discussion about policy and what that would be going forward, because things have changed in a way that no one really thought they would. It puts us in the sort of front foot in terms of actually almost shepherding the discussion into the way that we want it, as opposed to trying to fight all four corners, I guess, in terms of what people expect and what's always been the case. And digital signatures is another prime example. We don't walk about with quills anymore in our back pocket, and a lot of people would expect you to. So I think it's really important to start thinking about what else we can do to ensure the integrity of our business, but also how we can utilise digital technologies to more securely do these transactions and get them done in a more timely fashion, shall we say?
Yeah, and look, I think it's one that I've battled with, because it's one of the topics that I've talked about with more of the law firms through this period is e-signatures, and I'm kind of in the back of my head going, we've been doing this a long time, welcome to the party. Why have we not got it sorted out yet? And in fact, we've got a group as part of just a little shameless plug on the side, the Global Legal Hackathon that's happening at the moment. We've got e-signatures in as one of the projects to be worked on, one of the problem statements. And what's nice is it's actually the firms coming together to help to bring a solution in that space, because we know that there's all these individual things that need to be answered. Still, the legality question is floating out there, but having a swarm around that problem feels like we could probably fix it, because if we've got enough people getting behind it and battling with the challenges, we'll kind of get there. So it's interesting that one pops up. I'm conscious that we are close to time, so I'm just going to do one very, very quick one. This is for, I think Rachel and Lauren, we've got around this. How did you take steps to move from private client or transactional career to a legal tech role?
Ooh, Good question. People obviously usually presume that I hated being a lawyer and I was really fed up with it and I was really disgruntled solicitor. And that wasn't the case, actually. I was still a relatively junior lawyer and I still had lots of enthusiasm for it. I just realised that I could impact more change as a CEO of a legal tech business than as a really strong champion of tech as a lawyer. So I was just like, and also I was really passionate about this problem. And I had the idea for the LinkUp a long time before I actually went into to create it. And I was just so passionate. Every day in practice, I would be like, that would have solved that problem. Like, security is a big problem for the industry and the LinkUp encrypts everything. So I was like, well, that wouldn't have happened if we were using this platform. And it just became so exciting / so heavy on me that I couldn't not have done it. I don't think that's a typical route necessarily, but yeah, just something really passionate about. And I think now is even more exciting if sort of the person who's asking the question is because they're considering moving themselves. I think it's a really exciting time to do it with all this impetus and infrastructure around it.
I was similar. I didn't hate being a transactional banking lawyer. I really liked it. I was only 3.5 years into it. I wasn't doing it long enough to be totally jaded, but mine kind of came a bit by chance, a little bit by my own making. The sorts of projects that I was getting involved in at the time were large regulatory projects that involved a lot of DD, a lot of repapering, and technology was just an inherent part of how we were delivering those projects to clients. So I was lucky that I was working in a part of the firm where I was getting exposure to the use of legal tech quite early on in my career. And I found it interesting. And so as a junior lawyer, I thought, well, it's not going to come to me. I've got to go and find it myself. So I signed up to the Legal Geek and Women in LawTech mentorship scheme, which was great. And I got a really great mentor from Radiant Law through that, Alex Hamilton, who's been really useful in terms of just putting me in touch with what's actually quite a small community in the UK. And everyone knows everyone. And getting into that community and starting to meet the law techs, meet the guys in the businesses that are, pushing forward the legal tech agenda for their particular work, I found super interesting. And a bit like Lauren mentioned, we're at the start of a bit of a revolution in the legal market. And from my perspective, while, yeah, it's totally terrifying to give up what you just trained like 7 years to do and suddenly go down this totally different path, it's such a great time to do it. You're right at the very beginning of what will hopefully be quite a big revolution. And I'm that really annoying associate that pesters the trainees to get involved in things and tells them things like, you have to get involved because when you qualify, it'll look different again. But I think it's so important, we as junior lawyers have not been doing this long enough to be stuck in our ways. And we're coming in a generation who is a lot more IT literate, who has ideas about how things can be done differently. And it's a great time, I think, for junior lawyers to get involved in these sorts of teams, projects, initiatives, businesses, whatever it might be that you're interested in getting involved in. I'd say 100% do it.
It really is, and it's also a really cautionary tale as well for lawyers and law. If you're a managing partner of a law firm listening to this, that really do take heed that the people coming in underneath mine and Rachel's generation, like she said, are even more IT savvy than we are and even more passionate about this. If you're not listening to their ideas and you're not actively adopting technology, there's a real potential that you will lose some really key talent from your business to businesses like mine or to their own startups, because they really care about this and they're passionate about it. And it's, millennials vote with their feet, so really look after them and nurture those ideas, or you might lose key talent.
couldn't agree more. I think, and we need different strokes, right? Completely in there with different experiences and being able to bridge that gap between tech and law, particularly when you see time and time again where everyone looks to the lawyer in the room, and actually if you've got lots of lawyers in the room that are secretly also doing the code and less secretly doing all their actual tech work as well, it makes for a far easier conversation in many respects. Look, we are very close to time, and thank you very much. And this is the weird bit where there's no actual clapping, though. I know Ollie once upon a time had some clapping that went on in the background, but thank you very much. And those that are on cameras, please feel free to give a little clap to our panel. Thank you very much indeed.